But here's the truth. You're not going to get health care to these people by threatening to tax and eat the rich. You raise billionaires' taxes, they just leave the state. Or they leave the country. Or in some cases, the planet.
That's Bill Maher, a lifelong liberal, using his own platform to tear apart one of the most popular beliefs on his side of politics. And the uncomfortable truth is that the numbers seem to support his argument. What you're about to see is Joe Rogan, Bill Maher, and several level-headed guests challenging one of the biggest ideas in modern progressive politics, that every billionaire became rich by taking from others, and that free healthcare is being blocked by wealthy people holding onto their fortunes. If that's the version of reality you've been hearing for years, this discussion may be hard to ignore. If you enjoy watching political narratives collide with real-world data, hit subscribe because the conversation only gets more intense from here. And like every debate on this topic, it begins with the person everyone claims took everything.
I'm not a businessman, although I kind of am.
You are.
I kind of am,
Yeah.
in some weird way. I've become a businessman.
Yeah.
But this idea that it's easy to become a billionaire and that these billionaires somehow or another are the problem because they're not paying their fair share is so weird that's a narrative that actually gets pushed through when you look at the actual numbers of the tax base and how much they contribute and how many jobs they provide. And yeah, they make more money than everybody else. Right. You could do that too. It's like, this is one of the things that America is really good at. Right. You can come from nothing and become incredibly wealthy if you figure something out and go. And we just assume that everybody who makes an incredible amount of money stole it.
Same income, but two completely different explanations. The progressive view argues that huge wealth is proof that someone cheated the system. Rogan sees it differently. He says massive success often comes from solving a problem that millions of people willingly paid to solve. What gives his argument weight is the fact that he's speaking from experience. He didn't inherit wealth or come from privilege. He built his career from scratch with a microphone and a small room. So when he says that opportunities still exist, it doesn't sound like a billionaire talking down to ordinary people. It sounds like someone pointing toward a path he personally followed, which naturally leads to the next question. If that path is still there, why do so many people insist it was blocked by someone else's success?
That they robbed someone, that someone, the only, like, this is a narrative that gets pushed along democratic socialists, that no one achieves that. I think I literally heard AOC say this recently, that no one achieves substantial wealth without somehow or another victimizing other people.
Think about that for a moment because it drives the entire argument. Not that some wealthy people break rules, not that certain loopholes should be closed. The claim goes much further. The belief is that nobody becomes rich without hurting someone else. And once you accept that idea, every policy that follows feels completely justified. Tax them heavily. They earned it unfairly. The problem is that this mindset leaves no room for any other explanation. Every success story automatically becomes evidence of wrongdoing. Build a company that creates thousands of jobs and suddenly you're accused of exploiting thousands of workers. It's a closed system of thinking. Great for campaign slogans, but terrible for understanding how businesses and industries are actually built. And that's exactly why the next example becomes so uncomfortable for people defending that narrative.
Is the obvious counterexample, which is like every time you do the one click and the thing gets delivered to you 2 hours later at the cheapest possible price, saving you and your family a lot of time and money.
But at the expense of small mom and pop stores, allegedly.
Although a lot of them sell on Amazon, a lot of small businesses sell on Amazon.
Ideas are easy. Results are harder. The argument being made here is straightforward. If you continue increasing taxes and regulations, you don't automatically create a more equal and prosperous society. Sometimes you create slower growth, weaker economies, and fewer resources to fund social programs. To be fair, Europe is a huge and diverse place, and the reality is more complicated than a simple headline. Some countries perform very well while others struggle for many different reasons beyond taxes alone. But the larger warning remains important. Businesses and skilled workers have options. They tend to move toward places that treat them as contributors rather than suspects. Push too hard and you don't simply divide the pie differently. You risk watching the people creating it leave altogether. And no liberal voice in America explains that concern more directly than the next person speaking.
The other thing you can do is you can compare and contrast other countries that have more draconian policies in the direction that those folks are suggesting. And so Europe in particular, many European countries have a much more draconian, are much even more hostile to business. And the result is they're much poorer. Their slower growth are actually shrinking. The people there are much less well off. There's much less funding for social programs. And so you can also do the cross-country comparison.
This is where the conversation becomes personal. We're not listening to a cable news pundit. This is Bill Maher, someone who spent decades criticizing Republicans, openly saying that close to 60% of what he earns disappears before it ever reaches his bank account. And notice what he's actually arguing. He's not demanding lower taxes. His criticism is much more specific and far more uncomfortable for his own political side. Be honest about it. Stop telling voters that wealthy people pay nothing when many of them already hand over more than half of their income. When one of the country's most famous liberals starts exposing holes in a progressive talking point, the issue goes beyond messaging. It becomes a question of reality. Maher isn't abandoning his political beliefs. He's doing something that frustrates both sides. He's publicly fact-checking his own team, and the details he's about to share make the conversation even harder to ignore.
I paid to the government, if you add in state tax, local sales, property, fees, Obamacare, probably almost 60% of what I earn. That's a lot. And I still wouldn't mind if Bernie Sanders would stop saying the rich don't pay taxes. And while I'm sure the super rich with their army of accountants and corporate loopholes get away with us regular rich people pay a ton of taxes. And who stands up and gives us
the entire movement uncomfortable? Forget who pays, he already answered that. A small percentage of earners contribute a huge share of the taxes. The more difficult question comes next. How can the wealthy be taxed this heavily while so many poor communities still struggle? Because that's the part many people avoid discussing. America already spends enormous amounts on social programs. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food assistance, housing support, and Obamacare. The money is already moving through the system. So if wealthy people are contributing billions and vulnerable citizens still feel left behind, then maybe the issue isn't simply collecting more revenue. Maybe something between government spending and public results isn't working properly. That shifts the entire debate away from how much money comes in and toward where the money actually goes. And Maher is about to point directly at where the system keeps falling short.
The top 10% pay 72% of all federal income taxes, and the bottom half, 3%. The Democratic Socialists talk about socialism like we don't already have a lot. Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, nutritional assistance, Medicaid, Obamacare, disability, housing subsidies. Again, not against it, just the same question. How can you be soaking the rich and failing the poor so badly?
The image is meant to be humorous, and at first it is until you focus on the reality behind it. One version of America has access to private doctors and expensive wellness treatments. The other waits in line for a temporary clinic to arrive so volunteers can handle basic medical care in a parking lot. But the detail that should really grab your attention isn't the joke itself. It's the year. That report first aired in 2008 was discussed again years later, and people are still standing in those same lines. Trillions of dollars have been spent. Different administrations have come and gone. New promises have replaced old ones, yet the situation for many of those people hasn't changed. That isn't proof that government spends too little. It's evidence that simply spending more money has not solved these problems for nearly 20 years. And that brings us to the part of the argument that struggles most when it collides with reality.